Good day, folks. My name is Matthew Browngan. Here at Finding the Warmth of Our Sun at Madison 365. You can find us on YouTube, Spotify, Stitcher, and Apple Podcasts. Thanks for coming today. Today, and really the last couple of weeks, have shown a bit of close to my worst fears. And what we're seeing are kind of two things hand in hand. One is a slow-moving and probably failing coup. The other is a profoundly broken nation and people. And this coup attempt will only continue to further break our nation and people, regardless of its success. And make no mistake about it, Trump is attempting a coup, and he's being enabled by GOP leadership and much of the GOP establishment as well. His supporters are falling in line, and not many GOP leaders at really any level are speaking out, outside of a handful of folks that seem to be somewhat surprisingly dedicated to the Democratic project, small d, not as far as the party, but like the democratic process, right? You know, we're talking about, some of these folks like in Georgia and some of the state legislatures, which aren't succumbing to Trump's call to overturn the popular vote. But make no mistake about it, this attempt to overturn the popular vote is absolutely a big deal. It's a coup attempt in every way imaginable. It's probably not going to be successful. But it sets, one, a long-term danger in that somebody more capable, as well as the general GOP establishment, which has been shifting this way for a while, where they've, for a long time, rejected the notion that a Democratic president in the agenda was fully legitimate in real senses, as well as American. And this accelerated under Obama. And a core part of this is the very real rejection of the idea and reality of a multicultural democracy. Right? And Trump and his narcissism and strongman mentality have accelerated this. But this has been a long time coming. And there's been authoritarian leanings, and Wisconsin's been a great example of this within the GOP for a while. The stripping of powers anytime. I mean, we saw this with Governor Evers, and it's very anti-democratic stuff, as well as voter suppression laws and down the line. But what this falls down to, as I kind of come back around to the main point, is that white people in the macro, now it's not like all white people, but the majority of white people, and let's be real, the majority of white people have voted for Donald Trump, or so the majority of white voters voted for Donald Trump, the majority of white people support Donald Trump. This is a white issue. On the macro, white people reject the notion of a multicultural democracy. This has been the unifying issue among white voters since, this nation was first established. And then white people, specifically white Republicans, would rather support authoritarianism if it meant freedom from a multicultural democracy. To them, and this is a thing people are like, well, don't you want freedom? Don't you want liberty? Well, to them, liberty is not having a multicultural democracy. It's upholding this racialized caste system. So we have to understand that. So their idea of liberty is in direct contrast to many of our ideas of liberty and freedom. So we really gotta, freedom isn't just isn't a universally defined idea. And a lot of white voters would rather not directly confront these issues, even Democratic white voters. And we see this with their inability to directly confront their family, their neighbors, or to take this real coup as seriously as they should, or to take Trump as seriously as they should have before 2016, and down the line. Now, again, not all, but a large, and I'm betting majority of white Democrats don't take this threat of white nationalism and authoritarianism as seriously as they should, and falsely or live in their own delusions, and that they don't think this is as deep as it really is that they cannot imagine that about, it looks like right now, according to a recent YouGov poll, about 80% of GOP voters believe this election was illegitimate. Or the majority of GOP voters are QAnon folks on some spectrum. And that they support white supremacy in earnest, whether the voters wanted to admit that to themselves or not. And we see this in part, partly through rhetoric. There's a belief that the most illegitimate parts of this election came from majority or largely black metropolitan areas. They don't, they see, and we saw this rhetoric before, and for a while, that idea of real America, take away California, take away New York, these multicultural areas, they don't like to count as real America. They don't consider people of color and black folks as true or real Americans. They say take out Detroit or California. Giuliani says we would have won if you don't count cities with black people. Voss, here in Wisconsin, has said if you took Madison and Milwaukee out of the state election formula, we would have a clear majority. Well, yeah. I mean, if you cut off my leg, I'll have one leg. And this doesn't just have echoes, but a direct parallel between the paranoia and misinformation and views of legitimacy as we saw during Reconstruction, as well as the rise of white militias and white militia violence, such as the White League, which was very similar to like the Proud Boys now, which have recently shed their thinly disguised camouflage and have openly declared themselves white nationalists. To put it very simply, we have roughly 45 to 50% of our population that supports right-wing authoritarian populists and reject the idea of really democracy, a multicultural democracy. You can't have a functioning democracy or liberal political institutions in such a way. And we can embrace this in a real sense and understand where this is coming from, or we can live in the delusion and try and reach out instead of exercising power. We have to exercise power, and this is tough because the American people are fundamentally broken. America is fundamentally broken. This nation is fundamentally broken. So many of these folks embody and support this myth of America that is strong, the American exceptionalism. And this myth of U.S. history that I have alluded to many times, James Baldwin has alluded to many times, called the American lie. That idea of, freedom and down the line. But so many of these folks live in unreality. Again, this QAnon and socialists at every corner. Black Lives Matter is a terrorist organization. Climate denial. They're threatened by this order. But nothing about this is new. Again, you saw this during Reconstruction. This is part of a collective trauma, I believe. This fear that the oppressor has of a slave uprising, the terror at night they have of a slave uprising. That's what this is still. the boogeyman in the night. Black Lives Matter, Antifa socialists coming to burn down a neighborhood block near you. Because they have to believe this. Because it paints themselves as the good guys, as the defenders of freedom and liberty. Because if they are not defenders of freedom and liberty, then they are the oppressor, committing violence upon people. And what do we know about trauma? Those that accost violence have a traumatic response just as much as those that are accosted by violence. The oppressors are just as much traumatized, maybe not just as much, but are traumatized just as well as the oppressed are. And we have to, again, understand that this is trauma and I believe a very real trauma reaction. These lies, these myths, they're caught in it. And white progressives are caught in some of these lies and myths as well. Again, it's why they can't fully believe so many of their friends and neighbors are willing to embrace Trump and don't fully understand his appeal, because they still buy into the myths of America as well. And the myth of ever-present racial progress and down the line. And so we have to really break these myths and see America for what it truly is. So these white progressives rather placate them because of the threat of rebellion. And we saw this during Reconstruction, or really the overthrow of Reconstruction, the willingness to embrace the white Southerner that was threatening and very real rebellion to create a unified nation, or unified white people, opposed to a multicultural democracy, and fully embracing and putting your foot down, and just governing with power and authority, and saying this is who we're going to be. Too many white progressives continue to embrace this myth and a willingness to not see things for what they are. I don't believe we can fully change these people's minds. They have to wake up for themselves. But in the meantime, we have to exercise power. This is a very real reckoning, and there's no going back from this brokenness. There's no going back to the normal that was before, for better or for worse. We will never be what this nation was before this Trump presidency and this attempted coup. We have gone through a singularity, or maybe in the middle of it, as we're still feeling out what this new normal is going to be. So what must we do? We know there are more of us than them, those that are committed to democracy. But there's still quite a lot of them. You're looking at 40% of our voters, and probably roughly around, a large chunk of the nation as well. So you have to get rid of partisan districting, passing voting rights laws with robust national voter protections and regulations, admitting D.C. and Puerto Rico to statehood, expanding the Supreme Court, and getting rid of, taking the Senate and then trashing the filibuster. These are first steps. One, they're an expansion of democracy and help entrust power to people and to the democratic process, and to people that are willing to embrace the democratic process, regardless of where we are within this willingness to fully embrace a multicultural coalition or not, and the political and ideological side of it, of the lefties versus the moderates and blah 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 down that line. Next, we have to get much more aggressive, and this needs to be a central organizing aspect of every single part of the left, and that is the 270 Pact. Basically, the state 270 Pact, and what have been going on is states have been passing, I believe within their state constitution, these have been blue states, that their state electors or within the electoral college would vote for whoever won the national popular vote for presidential elections. Now, this only really takes effect once you get into the 270 electoral college votes, and we're very close. I'm forgetting what it's within like 30 or 20 electoral college votes. But the problem is that it's stuck. It's stuck at solid blue states. So close. And but there's other ways to do about this. So states maybe like Florida, where you can pass by referendum, and targeting states where you can pass things by referendum. This will effectively nullify the electoral college and put in place the ability for those doing the popular vote to win the presidency. Again, making things much more democratic. Small d, with the impact, at least in the short term, more democratic presidents. Now, any political coalition isn't a static endeavor. And now there's another not smaller, but undercurrent aspect of this, and that is actively improving people's lives. We shouldn't discount the impact that $1,200 or more and uninsurance benefits had on people's lives. A lot of people were making more per month due to the expansion of uninsurance benefits and the one-time stimulus check than they were before. That direct in your pocket. This helps secure people's votes. Just politically, it's smart. Now, that's outside of the moral aspect of just good governance, but we're talking about things like the Green New Deal, universal basic income, Medicare for all, expansion, these types of things that should be done within the first 100 days of a Biden presidency, particularly if they have the Senate. It's a real way to exercise power that directly improves people's lives in the now and helps secure votes. And there are things going beyond this, such as what we've seen of AOC and Beto and people that have and Doug Jones that have criticized the Democratic campaign apparatus, which is far too short term. It doesn't operate 365 in between elections in all 50 states, and working as closely as you can with other organizations to help secure votes. And there are things going beyond this, such as what we've seen with AOC and Doug Jones, Beto, and their criticism of the Democratic Party and the organization itself, and doing more 365-day organizing, building the base, 50 states, working closely with organizations, particularly Black and brown organizations, community-based organizations, and organizers on the ground, and issue campaigns, and connecting with voters on every issue. But this is already also a white issue, in the sense that, well, you're not going to be able to pull a lot of these white voters away from the Republican Party. You have to understand that. This isn't necessarily reconciliation per se. Well, one, we do need a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. But this is, the long-term thing is, white folks, you need to get your own. There's some lost causes, and you need to see those folks. But there's definitely people that you can move and start organizing around. It's more than just friends and family. It's really organizing in pulling folks towards embracing democracy and a multicultural democracy, and helping them through these tough thoughts. And these are going to be hard conversations, and they should be conversations. Let's be real about that. Much less arguments, and not on Facebook either. People dig in on Facebook. These need to be one-on-one or a small group, and reading exercises, like really work with your people. Because if you had, 40% of these, 40% of white voters vote for Democrat. If you had those folks really organizing within their network, who knows what we'd see. or a large percentage of them really organizing their network. Not just on Facebook, but person to person within anti-racist work and pushing towards a multicultural democracy and pulling people away from this unreality. Slowly but surely, you got to help people escape this cultism. But there's no going back to normal. There's going to be a large fight ahead of us. We are fundamentally broken. We are traumatized, which means Democrats have to exercise power in a democratic way, democracy way, small d. But that also means that you as voters have to push them to do things to expand democracy, have to push them and battle them against some of these folks' more moderating or moderate natures, so we can do things and exercise power in a real way. Just voting now and donating isn't enough. Push your local Democratic Party, state Democratic Party to organize more, to exercise power more, and to do things the right way. Start investing in people over property. We can't negotiate with ourselves and negotiate down. We have to exercise power at every level. And the organizing is not done. Because this attempted coup isn't going to be the last time that we've seen undemocratic forces coming from the right. It isn't the first time. And it's only going to get worse and more organized or more chaotic. And they're going to continue to attempt it. It's going to be very hard to govern, which means you must exercise power. That is it for this week, folks. My name is Matthew Brungen here at Finding the Warmth of Our Sun at Madison 365. Hit subscribe at YouTube, Spotify, Stitcher, and Apple Podcasts. Hit like and all that jazz. I hope you're staying safe and sheltering at home and wearing your mask when you're out and about. This is more infectious than when we all first began to panic as a society about COVID. I'm going to see a lot of death over the next coming months. This is going to get bad. It's going to get bad. So get ready, folks, if you haven't already. Have yourselves a good week and stay safe.
This is 365 Media.